We only remember the stallions that made a big impact or had influence in our industry. The other ones, maybe in a fleeting moment, maybe they were good show horses, and we remember them because of that. But the ones that we really key in on are the ones that had a major influence in our industry.
There are more exceptional cutting horses in the show pen today than ever before. They're more flashy, more athletic, and each have their own style. However, nearly every one of these cutting horses can be traced back to the same origin. Tell me those foundation horses that are responsible for the horses that we see today entering the show pen.
You've got King, P234, you've got 3 bars, and you've got Leo.
3 bars, Leo, and King.
These horses were around during the 1940s, right?
King was.
Okay.
3 bars was probably 1950, and then Leo would have been back in the 40s, right?
So to clarify, King P234, what was it about King that made him such a special sire?
King P234 produced race horses in the 40s, early 50s, and so they loved that. That's when the Quarter Horse Registry was just being founded, and so he was one of the top sires right there off the bat. And then he also had Royal King, he had Poco Bueno, and just every cutting horse out here has some King P234 blood in him, at least 80% of them did.
What about the individual that was responsible for Doc Bar? What about 3 bars?
3 bars brought together a mix of the thoroughbred influence, hybrid vigor, and extremely good conformation.
He's probably the most important horse, I think, if I had to pick any of them, him and King. Those 2 right there. He was a good racehorse. Wasn't a top flight racehorse, but he was a good racehorse. But you crossed him on the King bred mares, the Poco Buenos, the Poco Tibios, and it was just a dynamic cross.
What about Leo?
Leo brought many things to our industry. Conformation. He sired horses that looked better than he did, actually. Athletic ability. More than anything else, trainability. He was really a good, well-minded horse that accepted training extremely well.
Leo was a racehorse, and of course, I love the thoroughbreds in our quarter horse industry. I mean, they just add some strength to it, and they're pretty horses, long-necked. You just can't get them too big for our guy. So the Leos were racehorses to start with, and then they came with the Leo Sands, which would be Peppy Sands, Mr. San Peppy, Little Peppy. That set of horses right there, and they produced very, very well.
The 3 bars Leo cross was magic back in the day, 50-some years ago.
Leo mares on
3 bars, or 3 bars mares on Leo studs.
You mentioned the name that most everybody knows, Doc Bar. Can you tell me how he revolutionized the cutting horse industry?
Doc Bar actually revolutionized the cutting horse industry more by mistake than on purpose.
And why Doc Bar produced so well, we don't know.
Well, it kind of happened by accident, right? From what I hear.
Yeah, he was a halter horse. Well, he was a racehorse, supposed to be to start with.
Yeah.
Tom Finley raised him out there in Chandler, Arizona.
Tom Finley, who was a very close friend of mine and a mentor of sorts, a past president of AQHA, raised the horse. Ultimately, he ended up in the hands of the Jensen family, and Charlie Ward was their son-in-law. Charlie was training cutting horses, and the Jensens decided to cross their cowbred mares on Doc Bar. Actually, they tried before that, the Finley ranches tried to get Doc Bar to run, and he wasn't fast enough to even, I think, get A time. Back then we had A, double A, and triple A time. He wasn't fast enough to scare anybody, but he was athletic, and he was a very sensible horse. Had a lot of conformation, and what he did is he brought the 3 bars influence into our cutting horse, and so I talked about hybrid vigor and the ability for 3 bars to infused our breed with that quality. It just went right through his veins and into Doc Bar's through Lightning Bar. We were exposed to something brand new, an outcross stallion.
I think he changed everything. Back in the days when we had the King and the Hollywood Golds and the Ray Del Ranchos, they were good cow horses, but they didn't move like the Doc Bar horses do. And it's from the 3 Bars influence. 3 Bars, Lightning Bars to Doc Bar. And of course, the 3 Bars were great race horses, great halter horses. Big phenomenal there too.
Doc Bar had a knack for siring some really athletic, trainable individuals that had a lot of spark along with it, and captured everyone's attention. And they had an unusual way of working a cow, had a lot of flutter. I use the term get jiggy with it. Doc Bar's got jiggy with it.
Before the 70s, probably 60s, 70s, a lot of stallions were more cold-blooded. They're real cowy, but, lacked a little bit of momentum or juice. We had 3 Bars, who's a great horse, great stud, great cowy horse, had a little bit of speed, so it kind of set the bar a little higher for our colts, made them a little bit more athletic. So that athleticism with the cow horse sense really kind of raised the bar, I think. But when Doc Bar showed up and we started breeding to those Doc Bar stallions that were great, and there's, a plethora of them, they were all great. What they introduced to me was that juice, where now you coupled the cowiness of a horse with that juice, a little bit more hot, maybe a little easier to train. They just took it to a new level. So I think you look at all those great Doc Bar stallions, and of course, without Pocolina and Teresa Tivio, you wouldn't have had any of them. So there were great mares involved, bred to Doc Bar that produced Docalina and Dry Doc, Smart Little Lena. Some of the great horses that you could track back to Doc Bar real close were phenomenal athletes in themselves, and then they produced just like them.
When Fizzabar came along,
Okay,
she was a daughter, the first really good cutter.
I see.
And when she came along, and she was out with Pocativio mare and by Doc Bar, and when they saw this, they said, "Whoa, this is something special." And so then everybody jumped on the Doc Bar bandwagon. But it was really on the King bred mares, the Pocativios, the Pocahueno mares that made the whole deal work. But I don't think there's a horse today in the fraternity, if you can find one, you bring it to me, that doesn't have Doc Bar in his bloodlines.
What were some other studs around the same time Doc Bar was in his prime that you would say had an effect or an impact on the horses we see today?
Horses that really had a big effect along with Doc Bar at that time were Pepe San, Mr. San Pepe, and then a little later on, Pepe San Badger, or we refer to him as Little Pepe. So they showed during the 60s and the 70s, and then they started siring foals that really made a big impact towards the early 70s and on through the middle 80s. Smart Little Lena, who had a big impact and still does through his daughters today in our cutting horse industry, was a great example of that magic cross we've been talking about. He was by Docalina, who's by Doc Bar, and he's out of a daughter of Pepe San, who's out of a daughter of Royal King, and Royal King was by King. So you see, we had a great influence of all those sires we talked about.
What were some of those horses in the 70s, 80s, 90s that played a role in the evolution of the cutting horse?
When we think back with the horses, like Little Pepe was such a phenomenon and such a great horse. He raised the bar. And I think that that's probably when I remember horses like Lynx Melody, or with Larry Reeder, or, Bill Freeman on Smart Little Lena, Tom Lyons on Duck's Oak. They go hand in hand. I remember the rider, the trainer, and the horse. But I think that they set the bar. They just eke it up just a little bit every time they, that year, when you watch any one of those horses I just mentioned compete, it is, they're like one of a kind in their circle. The cutting was never over unless one of those great horses had already worked.